2 children vanished. The system blinked, and a man without permission picked up the pieces. Not for credit, not for closure, but because some names are worth remembering, and some cases don't get left behind. There's something that happens to a man when he sees the same story play out over and over again. A child goes missing. The town holds its breath. The headlines scream, and then silence. Reports get shelved. Witnesses go quiet. The community moves on because it has to, but he doesn't. A detective, name not mentioned for confidential reasons, wasn't assigned to the Sullivan case. He wasn't asked to look into it. In fact, they told him not to. But when he saw those 2 faces, Lily, just 6, and Jack, barely 4, he saw something the rest of the country missed. A cover-up stitched together with red tape, media management, and institutional failure. He's been in law enforcement for over 22 years. And he'll tell you himself, this case, it reeks. From the GPS data that never made it to public records, to the forgotten metallic star sticker found near a decaying bridge no one was supposed to search. Something's off, and he's not letting it go. He doesn't want attention. He doesn't care if he loses his badge. All he wants is the truth. And tonight you'll hear how one man decided to go off the record, off the grid, and into the shadows to find out what really happened to Lily and Jack Sullivan. To dive into this, kindly subscribe to our channel if you believe in fighting for justice. We've just crossed 2,000 subscribers, all because of your support, and we need that same energy to reach 3,000, then 5,000, and then 10,000. So go ahead and drop your DNA on that subscribe button, because wherever you are, the day this vision is fulfilled, I will send my appreciation straight to you. Let's keep building this community that fights for justice together. He remembers the photo. That's what stays with him, not the press conference, not the search map, not even the first news alert, just that photo. 2 children, side by side, one grinning wide with a gap-toothed smile, the other with a shy look, head tilted ever so slightly. Lily and Jack Sullivan. The backdrop was ordinary. A suburban backyard, chain-link fence, a plastic toy castle in the corner. It looked like 1,000 other family photos. But something in it haunted him. Something about their eyes. The way Jack's hand rested gently on Lily's shoulder. Protective. A little too mature for his age. Like he knew something was coming. He stared at that photo for too long, printed it, taped it up in his basement office. Not because he was on the case, he wasn't, but because no one else seemed to be looking at it closely. By the time he tuned in, the story had already begun to die. The RCMP had done their briefings. Search parties had come and gone. Posters faded in the rain. Media attention scattered like dry leaves in the wind. The story was already slipping into that place where missing children go when the headlines get tired. But he wasn't tired. He was angry. He'd been around long enough to know the signs. The way agencies start speaking in vague language, investigative hold, active leads, community cooperation, that usually means one thing. They've got nothing. Or worse, they've got something, and they're not allowed to say it. He didn't like how quickly the story shifted. One moment, it was all hands on deck. The next, it was like Lily and Jack never existed. RCMP statements became robotic. Emotional appeals stopped. And then came the quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your skin crawl. He asked around. Nothing official, just whispers in parking lots, off-duty chats over coffee. He heard phrases like above our pay grades and pressure to close the book. That's when it clicked. This wasn't just a missing persons case. It was something else, something rotting just beneath the surface. And that's when he made a decision. No authorization, no approval. He was going to dig alone if he had to. Because someone had to keep looking. Someone had to stare at that photo long enough to feel what everyone else was trying to forget. Cool air. Late autumn. The kind of day where the light stretches long across the pavement, and the leaves stick wet to the soles of your shoes. He wasn't on duty. He was at a hardware store buying replacement parts for a leaky tap he'd been ignoring for 3 weeks. The kind of errand that doesn't matter until suddenly it does. He saw the first alert on the local news feed. It was short: 2 children missing from a residential street on the edge of town. RCMP called to investigate. No foul play suspected, yet. He scrolled past it. Not because he didn't care, but because it was written like all the others. Dry, procedural, unalarming. But that changed within the hour. Social media began to spiral. A neighbor posted dashcam footage of police setting up tape around a wooded trail. Someone else shared a blurry photo. Officers scanning a small creek with handheld thermal gear. And then the mother's voice, shaky, exhausted, echoed through a live broadcast. Please, if anyone sees them, bring them home. By 6 p.m., the photo of Lily and Jack was everywhere. Their ages, their last known clothing, the time they were last seen. But even as the story exploded online, something felt off. What wasn't said was louder than what was. There was no mention of the time gap, how hours had passed between the children's disappearance and the call to emergency services. No clarification on who was with them last. No press release from the father. No community lead. Just a repeated refrain: "We are investigating all possibilities." He noticed the inconsistencies right away. Reports said they were last seen walking near their home, but the direction kept changing. One outlet said east, toward the park. Another said west, near a dirt trail behind the subdivision. And no Amber Alert. That was the moment he stopped what he was doing. No Amber Alert. He remembered standing there in that aisle, holding a rusty wrench, the weight of that absence hitting harder than it should have. Protocols were clear. 2 children under the age of 10, missing together, last seen in daylight. It should have triggered the alert within minutes. But it didn't. He drove home with the radio off, sat in silence. The kind of silence that doesn't ask questions. It screams them. Later that night, he pulled the official RCMP press briefing. It was tight, scripted, uniformed. There was no urgency in their voice. No trembling, no grief, just procedure. He rewound it, watched it again, then again. He kept staring at the officer's face. Calm, too calm. And that's when something inside him shifted. He wasn't involved in the case. He wasn't invited to be. But deep down, he knew this wasn't going to be solved the normal way. Not by protocol. Not by paperwork. This was going to take something else entirely. He didn't have access to the full case file. Not yet. But the things that were public, they didn't add up. And worse, the things that weren't being said echoed louder than what was. Take Daniel Martel, for instance, the children's stepfather. He was the last known adult to have seen Lily and Jack that morning. At least, that's what the original reports claimed. In his statement, he said they were playing in the front yard, while he was in and out of the house doing weekend chores. But neighbors told a different story. One said they saw him arguing with someone on the phone in the driveway. Another claimed they never saw the kids outside at all that day. And then came the revision. Suddenly, Daniel's account shifted. He wasn't outside. He was in the garage, fixing something. The children weren't in the yard. They were around. Loose language. Unanchored. No timestamps. Just impressions. That's red flag number 1. Red flag number 2. The silence of the mother. She appeared once briefly in a local TV appeal. She thanked the community. Pleaded for help. Said she couldn't eat. Couldn't sleep. But that was it. No follow-up interviews. No public vigils. No outreach. She stopped speaking altogether. Now people grieve in different ways. Not everyone screams into a camera. But he'd seen enough cases to know something wasn't sitting right. Her absence from the public narrative wasn't just strange. It was strategic. Then came the trail cam footage. Or rather, the delay. The area where the children were last reported seen was lined with private properties, hunting cabins, and conservation trails. Several had motion-triggered cameras, standard in rural edges like that. But for almost 2 weeks, nothing. No mention of footage. No confirmed sightings. And then out of nowhere, an officer admitted during a press conference that they were reviewing trail data. What data? From where? Why hadn't it been addressed sooner? And even stranger, when that footage was finally discussed in more detail, the RCMP stated it was inconclusive and did not show the children, but the time stamps. They were incomplete, cropped, some frames blurred, and one camera facing the east trail, closest to the small wooden bridge, was allegedly not recording at all due to a technical fault. That didn't sit right with him. Too many coincidences. Too many convenient failures. He scribbled down a note in his personal ledger. Was footage pulled intentionally? Who benefits from delay? Who confirms malfunction? It wasn't just about the cameras. It was about the gaps. The gaps in time, the gaps in memory, and the growing gap between the truth and the version being handed to the public. And in those gaps was where the real story lived. He wasn't supposed to be reviewing any GPS data. He didn't have access, not officially, but old habits don't die, and old contacts don't forget favors. Through a quiet channel, he obtained a partial log of geolocation pings from the Sullivan family's mobile devices, data the RCMP had supposedly reviewed, archived, and deemed non-essential to the timeline. He read through the spreadsheet at 2 a.m., the glow of his laptop washing over the faces of Lily and Jack taped to the wall beside him. One data point caught his eye. It was tied to a secondary phone, not the mother's, not Daniel's, a third phone, an old one likely belonging to the kids, used for games, music, maybe the occasional emergency call. That device pinged once. Just once. 11:43 a.m., the day they vanished. Coordinates pointed to a patch of land near a disused walking trail behind a conservation fence. Remote, overgrown, right near a small wooden bridge locals often referred to as the Dead Crossing. It wasn't on the official search map. He cross-referenced it with drone footage and municipal records. That stretch of trail had been marked off 2 years prior, after a landslide had weakened the bank. It wasn't maintained, it wasn't patrolled, and it wasn't searched. So he went there himself. No backup, no warrant, just a thermos of burnt coffee and a gut feeling. It was quiet when he arrived, almost too quiet. Birds scattered as his boots crunched through gravel and dead pine needles. The wooden bridge was still there, rotted at the edges, splintered boards, a hand-painted warning sign half fallen into the brush. And then he saw it, near the far end of the bridge, partly buried in damp soil. Something glinted against the decay. Small, shiny, out of place. He knelt down, brushed back the moss, and uncovered it a metallic star sticker. Silver, torn at the edge. The kind children get in classrooms, or wear on their clothes. He froze. He'd seen that star before. He pulled up the missing persons bulletin. There it was, plain as day. Lily's jacket, blue denim, left chest pocket, decorated with silver stars. The sticker had come off, or been torn off. It wasn't much, but it was something real, something physical, and it hadn't been documented anywhere. Not in the reports, not in the statements, not in the RCMP's public disclosures. In fact, that bridge wasn't mentioned at all. He took photos, logged coordinates, bagged the sticker in a sealed pouch, and then standing on that broken bridge, he looked out at the cold water below and whispered to himself something he hadn't said in years. They missed this on purpose, because this changed everything. It meant the children were here, that someone had been lying, that the official timeline was broken, and that if a 6-year-old girl had made it this far, alone or otherwise, someone knew, and they buried it. He didn't need permission. He needed answers, and he was going to dig until the silence gave way to something louder. He returned to the bridge the next morning, early, before most of the town even turned on their porch lights. This time he wasn't alone. Not exactly. He parked off the main road, walked the remaining distance, with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. gloves, measuring tape, a flashlight, and an old field journal he hadn't used in years. There was no crime scene tape. No signs of previous forensic activity. As far as official reports were concerned, this place didn't exist. But someone had been there before. The soil near the foot of the bridge had been disturbed. A wide rut, deep impressions, not fresh, but not ancient either. Mud hardened around the pattern. Grooves, parallel, identifiable, tire tracks. He knelt down and studied them in silence. Passenger vehicle, narrow tread, not off-road. Something light, a sedan maybe. Not the kind of car you drive up here, unless you have a reason, or a destination. He sketched the pattern, took measurements, then traced the direction. The tracks didn't come from the main trail. They veered in from the side, cutting through brush and low grass, just wide enough to suggest someone knew the back way in. That meant intent. Someone didn't stumble upon the bridge. They sought it out, quietly, privately, and they left before anyone could notice. He pulled out his phone and opened his notes, typing just one sentence. Whoever drove here knew no one would be looking. Down the road, past the tree line, was a small clearing, a local rest stop of sorts, used by hunters, dog walkers, and in the summer, teenagers looking for trouble. He walked the path, slow and deliberate. That's where he met the first local. An old man, mid-70s, dressed in flannel, boots worn to the sole. He was walking a retriever with a limp. The man nodded as they crossed paths. That's all it took. You here for the Sullivan case? The man asked, unprompted. The detective didn't confirm. He didn't have to. Thought so. The man continued. You ain't the first one poking around, but you're the first without a uniform. They talked for a while. Nothing formal. No tape recorder. Just memory. The man said he came out that day. Sunday morning. The day the kids vanished. He walked this path every day around the same time. That morning the bridge trailhead was blocked by a parked car. Silver, 4-door, no plates. Didn't think much of it, the old man said. Thought it might have been a poacher, or someone having car trouble, but it didn't belong there. He'd told someone, left a voicemail with a public RCMP line. Never got a call back. Weeks later he figured it didn't matter. The detective asked if anyone else remembered seeing the car. The man shook his head. They didn't want to remember, son. You ask too many questions here. People start closing their doors. Back at the bridge, he scanned the edges again. Brush disturbed. Weeds flattened. Like someone stood there, watched from the trees. Waiting, or maybe returning. He photographed the tire marks, documented the elevation, then stared at the bridge once more. Something about it felt hollow, like it had swallowed something. He wrote in his journal, why here? Why not anywhere else? And what did they leave behind that we haven't found yet? Because here's what the RCMP didn't mention. Those tire tracks. They were noted by an early responder, but they were dismissed, logged as community foot traffic, and ignored. The photos weren't filed. The search perimeter stopped just short of this clearing. And now, months later, here it was again. Still ignored. Still unexplained. But not by him. There are only a few places left where truth still slips through the cracks. Corners of small cafes. Forgotten pub booths. The end of a cigarette on the edge of a precinct parking lot. That's where he found him. An old colleague. Former liaison. Still wore the uniform. Still followed the chain of command. But the wear in his eyes said he'd stopped believing in it a long time ago. He didn't bring a notepad. Didn't flash credentials. Just 2 coffees and a paper tray. And a quiet question. You worked the Sullivan case, didn't you? The man didn't answer at first. He just nodded, slowly, then said, you didn't hear it from me. That was the beginning. The conversation danced at the edge of danger. Measured words, half-truths, names avoided. But the message was clear. There was heat. The officer finally admitted. Way more than usual. Before the report even crossed our desks, there were people from above, outside agencies, outside towns, telling us to manage the message, not solve the case. Manage it. The detective leaned in. Why? A pause, then a low breath, almost a whisper. Because this wasn't supposed to go public the way it did. There were decisions made, before the kids even disappeared. That word, before, cut through the noise like a blade. He clicked the button in his jacket pocket. A tiny recorder lit up silently in his hand. One chance, one voice, no backup. The officer didn't notice, or pretended not to. He kept talking, eyes fixed on the window. When the footage came in, the trail cams, they weren't blank, they were cut. Specific timestamps gone. Clean, not corrupted, not glitched, removed. We were told to log them as inconclusive, and not escalate. The detective pressed, gently. By who? Doesn't matter. The man snapped. Then softer. You think the RCMP makes all the calls? Not in a case like this. He asked about the bridge, the sticker, the tire tracks. Another pause. Then came the admission. Someone logged the tire tracks. Patrol team on day 2. But it never made it past the shift supervisor. Too far outside the radius. Not useful. Not clean. Not clean. He repeated, almost to himself, as if that was the real priority. The officer looked back at him, something flickering in his expression. Guilt? Maybe. Fear? Or both. Look, he said, you keep digging like this. You're gonna end up where they want this case to go. Nowhere. And you're gonna drag yourself with it. He stood up, took his coffee. No handshake. But before he walked out, he turned and said one last thing. Whatever you think you know, it's worse. The door closed. The bell above it jingled. The detective sat alone, the recorder still running in his palm. And in the silence that followed, a quiet rage began to rise. They weren't just missing children anymore. They were evidence. Evidence of something no one wanted uncovered. There's something about silence that becomes deafening when you start pulling at the edges. And Daniel Martel's silence, it wasn't grief. It was control. The detective began where no one else had gone at the courthouse. Small town, small records office. Most of it still paper. No fingerprint to search by. No national flag. But he knew the trick. Check the restraining orders, protection applications, emergency hearings, things that fall through the cracks, because they aren't technically convictions. It took him 3 days to find the first one, filed under a previous partner's name. 2016. She was pregnant at the time. Claimed Daniel pushed her during an argument, and threatened to erase the mistake if she went public. No charges. Case closed due to lack of cooperation. A year later, another record. Same partner. This time she filed for emergency custody of their infant daughter. Claimed he was emotionally unstable, manipulative, used isolation as control. The application was withdrawn after 3 weeks. She moved provinces, disappeared off the legal grid. That daughter, never mentioned in any media coverage, as if she didn't exist. And then more recent filings. Anonymous tips to child services. 2 in the span of 8 months, both citing suspected bruising on Jack's upper arms. One mentioned a black eye Jack claimed he got from falling down the stairs. But the record showed no home visit. No follow-up, just a note. Concern unfounded. File closed. The detective stared at the paperwork in disbelief. He'd worked child welfare cases before. He knew what it meant when reports vanished, or were closed without review. It wasn't efficiency. It was redirection. Digging further, he contacted someone inside the local child services office. Off the record, former worker, burned out of the system now, but still haunted. She confirmed what he suspected. We had 5 flagged entries on that household between 2022 and 2024. 2 were dropped by supervisors before they reached intake review. The rest disappeared. When he asked why, she said something he would never forget. Because someone wanted that house quiet, and quiet homes don't get visits. Jack had shown signs. Lily too. A teacher had written a note in Jack's file just weeks before the disappearance, citing a sudden drop in participation, frequent flinching, and unexplained fatigue. The school never forwarded it to family services. The teacher left on stress leave shortly after. These weren't rumors. These were paper trails. Trails that had been erased, closed, or lost. He printed them all, laid them across his wall. Names, dates, voicemail, decisions, and in the middle of it all, Daniel Martel, calm, collected, present at every disappearance of truth. He looked back at the photo of Jack, that small lopsided smile, the way his arm rested across Lily's shoulders, protective, too protective, like a child trying to shield someone from something. And now the silence made sense. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't mourning. It was orchestration. The question wasn't whether Daniel Martel had something to hide. The question was, why was everyone helping him do it? There's always one case that follows you. Doesn't matter how many you've worked. There's always one that refuses to be buried. And for him, it was a girl named Sierra, 8 years old, disappeared walking home from school. Bright green backpack, left side strap was torn. That's all they ever found. The investigation was swift at first. Helicopters, dogs, press conferences. But then came the doubts. No signs of struggle. No credible leads. No body. The mother was deemed unstable. The father disappeared halfway through the investigation. Child Services admitted they'd dropped the ball. Twice. But no one was ever held accountable. The trail went cold within months. He remembers knocking on doors for 12 weeks straight, burned through his vacation time, ate in his car, slept 2 hours a night, and still nothing. The worst part wasn't that they didn't find her. The worst part was how everyone just stopped. Stopped asking, stopped hoping, as if the absence itself became too heavy to carry. And so they dropped it. But he didn't. Even now, years later, he still kept Sierra's missing poster folded in the back of his notebook. The ink had faded. The crease had split the page in two. But her eyes, those stayed sharp. That's what was happening here. Again with Lily and Jack. Same silences, same misdirection, same quiet pull from above, telling everyone to move on. Look forward. Focus elsewhere. He sat alone in his basement office, staring at the wall of printouts. The bruises, the deleted footage, the note from the teacher, the star sticker in the dirt. And he broke. Not loud, not dramatic, just a slow, silent collapse into the chair. Head in hands, breathing shallow, the kind of breakdown that comes after too much knowing, and not enough justice. He whispered her name, Sierra, then theirs, Lily, Jack, as if saying them out loud, made a promise, a vow. He wouldn't lose them, not again, not like this. He wiped his face, sat up straight, then pulled a sticky note from the side of his screen, and scribbled 5 words in all caps. This time I don't stop. Because this wasn't just another case. It was the last line between truth and silence. And this time, he was staying on the line. There's a moment in every case where the file stops being just paper. When it stops being evidence, and starts breathing. This was that moment. The star sticker, the tire tracks, the conflicting timelines, the vanished bruises in Jack's school file, the unanswered tip lines, the trail cam gaps, the pressure to keep things quiet, all of it threads in a noose. He looked at the board. No longer a collection of questions. It had become a map, a blueprint of neglect, manipulation, and deliberate inaction. He stood in the center of the room, hands clenched, jaw locked, his voice steady, quiet but lethal. This case is mine now.
He didn't mean jurisdictionally.
He meant morally. Personally, completely. I don't care who it implicates. I don't care how many warnings come down the chain. I don't care if I lose my license, my name, my peace. I'm not stopping. Because this was no longer about policy, or channels, or proper steps. Those had all failed. What was left? was duty. He began copying files, backing up drives, contacting old reporters, ones not afraid to print names, whispering to retired forensic experts, building something no one could shut down. He reached out to a family lawyer who once lost a niece, to a similar silence. Together they started drafting questions, not just for the RCMP, but for the Ministry of Children and Family Development. He submitted anonymous packages to 3 independent journalists, included everything except his name. Because it wasn't about him, it was about 2 names, 2 faces, 2 small unfinished stories, buried beneath a web of people, too afraid to follow the truth to its end. And now, that truth had someone chasing it, who wasn't afraid anymore. He walked back to the bridge one final time, stood at the same place Lily's sticker had been. The air was cold, quiet, still, but something had shifted. A pulse, a promise. "You're not forgotten," he said aloud, eyes fixed on the woods beyond. "Not by me, not now, not ever." He turned, walked back through the clearing, boots heavy, purpose clear. He had no press pass, no unit badge, no clearance, but he had something stronger, conviction, and the quiet fury of a man who's done waiting for someone else to care. If you believe the truth about Lily and Jack Sullivan deserves more than silence, share this video. Someone out there knows something, and someone else is finally asking the questions the system won't. Subscribe to stay with the investigation, because this isn't over, not even close.